there's always something that your company is not doing as well as you think it should. So let's say you have like 50 product managers in your company, and you can zoom out and understand that nobody's really doing product discovery very well, for example. Well, that's your chance, because once you identify something that your company needs, you need to build your profile towards that. So you need to upskill yourself to bridge that gap, and then you need to be known for it.
Welcome to the Product Weekend podcast with Brito, Moita and Tejão. We hope you enjoy.
Welcome to the Product Weekend podcast. Today with me, Brito and Moita, and with a special guest, Afonso Malo Franco. Join us in a great chat about Afonso's skyrocketed career progression, who is accountable for the product vision, role of OKRs, and many more golden nuggets. If you're already a listener, you know that by the end of the episode you'll find the release notes. If you're in a rush, check them to better understand the flow of the episode. Thank you. Hi everyone, welcome to the new episode of Product Weekend, and thank you Afonso, thank you for being here.
My pleasure, thanks for having me.
So we'd like to ask you, and normally we start with this, you already passed the vibe check during our off the podcast, so we'd like to ask you, what's a recent weekend that you really enjoyed?
Ooh, a recent weekend. Recently, it has been snowing in Stavanger. That was really, really nice. I went outside with my son and wife, and we just had an amazing time together, enjoying the snow. And it was nice for him too, as well, to experience a bit for the first time.
It's the first time. Cool.
It's his first time, yeah. He's 1.5, so I bet he doesn't remember last year.
Cool. Could you give us a brief introduction of your background? Why are you here now in product? What happened during your life?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm based in Norway, therefore the snow, but I'm Portuguese. I moved to Norway a few years ago. I basically broke into product as a product manager, stumbled upon product basically like a lot of us, and worked as a product manager in a company called Ladal Medical, amazing company, fantastic people, one of the world leading providers for edtech solutions for healthcare. And then quickly got into product leadership roles, which was really fun, learned a lot. And then after that, moved into a company called Easy as a product director, which was once one of the fastest growing tech companies in Europe. We've enjoyed like massive growth and learned a lot as well. And currently I am the founder of Scandinavian Product Group, which is something I haven't launched officially, but it's been cooking for a few weeks, and I'm very excited.
Awesome.
And on the side, I've just been writing a lot about product. I'm super passionate about product. I enjoy talking and being part of the community, and then share things I've learned and being part of it.
Awesome. And I think we'll get into a lot more detail about your career, and especially because it's a super interesting one, the way you managed to scale fast and go from individual contributor to leader and to have a bigger impact. So we want to get into the details on that one. But before that, I have a curiosity. Sure. So you've started one of the most well-known Portuguese TV shows, Inspector Max, for the Portuguese people listening.
Yeah, that's true.
And yes, it's still going on, so people still see your younger self on TV every weekend.
Yeah.
But I'm curious how that experience impacted your life and your career. So both for the good and the bad parts. I guess also you've had a lot of exposure with that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely a lot of pros and cons. So pros, it's really nice to be part of something like that, where you, from very, very early age, you get to challenge yourself almost professionally, because it is basically a job, even though just for context, I was 8 years old, so I didn't really take it as a job. I had a lot of fun, and it was a series with dogs, and so I love dogs, and so for me, it was just fun. But as time went by, I realized that it was a bit actually work, and I was not for example, visiting friends when I wanted to. I was basically doing everything together with school. So sometimes I wanted to stay longer at school, but I had to basically go to work, essentially. Yeah. And so at some point, it started to hit me that, oh, okay, well, this maybe isn't something that I want to do forever. Another thing was, you know, in retrospective, I've learned a lot when it comes to communication, like being on TV, basically. I really think that it helped me a lot with developing my communication skills from a very early age. So that was very helpful. At the same time, being exposed and being sort of semi-famous for someone who enjoys his privacy is also, it takes a bit of a hit because you become like known on the streets and
you can feel the
something
gossip.
that doesn't. Yeah, exactly. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen anymore. But back then it was a topic. Like I was stressing about it sometimes, and because you would go to the cinema and then you would have to give autographs and stuff like that, which was something you're very grateful for at some point. But then it becomes a bit like, interesting. So. Yeah. You start thinking at a very early age that, okay, if I go to this place, I am known, I'm being observed, you know. And so that was something I had to learn how to deal with. And in retrospective, ended up being awesome because I grew up a lot through those experiences.
Right. Awesome.
Can imagine. And right now you started your career around product for, well, we can say about 5 years ago. Now you are
6 years, 5, 6 years.
5, 6, exactly. Now you are like a product leader, startup founder, international guest speaker. But what I want to ask you is, what were your goals 5 to 6 years ago?
So I think it's 6 years, and I always had the vision to do something like I am doing today. So it's been planned, even though back in the day I thought it would take a bit longer. Mm-hmm. So in some way I did speed up my career because I was just very lucky with the experiences I got. And so luck takes a big part of it, and I'm not just being humble, it is true. Like luck is important and it happens. Sometimes you just get to be in the right time, in the right place at the right time, basically. And that happened to me. I'm very grateful for having been part of those experiences and having had that chance. A lot of hard work as well, a lot of time invested in learning, basically, which we can talk about. It's something that has definitely transformed my career, like the time that I've put in and a few other things. So if you want to talk about career, I'm happy to share a few tips as well.
Exactly. I know the question I'm about to do can be a little bit cliche or tricky if you want, but how to skyrocket a career like you just did?
I think each case is a case, and context is very different. And for me, there was a few things that worked, and through coaching product managers, I see that these things tend to be very valuable. And so the first thing is you need to identify something that your company is not doing very well. So in large companies, this can be fairly easy to identify, actually. There's always something that your company is not doing as well as you think it should. So let's say you have like 50 product managers in your company, and you can zoom out and understand that nobody's really doing product discovery very well, for example. Mm-hmm. Well, that's your chance, because once you identify something that your company needs, you need to build your profile towards that. So you need to upskill yourself to bridge that gap, and then you need to be known for it. So basically, identify something your company actually needs, work hard to bridge that gap and to be the one that brings that skill set. And then it's also not enough that you upskill yourself and that you become really good at that. You need to be known that you're good at that. So you need to share the work, you need to show people, you need to help people around you, around those things. And then you need to, so those are the 3 steps that to me are very important, something that has worked for me and has worked for others that other product managers I help. The 4th thing is to build relationships. I don't think people spend enough time building relationships when they want to skyrocket their career, let's put it like that, as you said, is almost as important, if not more important, than building your skill set. Like building your relationships is probably more important than building your skill set, internally and externally. Because when you want to make a move from, for example, individual contributor, like product manager to product leader, like what you're looking for in a product leader is someone who is a people person, someone who can bring a team together, someone who can have tough conversations if he has to, someone who deeply understands the customers, deeply understands the business, someone who is able to coach people, someone who deeply enjoys coaching people and helping teams grow and remove tension from different disciplines like from sales and marketing. And so these are all great qualities of a product leader. And to do those things well, you need to be able to build relationships, and you need to, you need to really invest a lot of time doing that. And so when someone is looking for a product leader, they want that type of profile. And if you're there already with that profile, showing how great you are and how you manage to bridge this gap in your company, then you are already basically well positioned to grow.
How should we build, for example, as an introvert, how should we build the confidence to show work to others?
I think you need to take it step by step, like baby steps that work for you. And I don't think there's a general recipe in a way or rule of thumb. I think it really depends person to person. Like, I know that some people have no problem in getting on a stage and just share everything they know, and they're charismatic and it works well for them. And of course, as you said, some people are more introverted, and that's totally fine. But you need to find one way that works for you, that where you're comfortable doing, to do that. And there's definitely a lot of great product leaders who are introverted, and they're great product leaders. So you do not need to be, you do not need to be an extrovert to show people your work. There's always ways to do that work for you.
So like maybe find alternative ways that you can present your ideas and your knowledge, not only like showcasing on a whole hands with all the company, but maybe sending an email,
Absolutely.
maybe preparing documentation.
Absolutely.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah.
Absolutely. One-on-ones with people that you're comfortable with. Because the thing is, once you start showing your great work to people you're comfortable with, those people become your, basically,
Our champions.
Exactly. They become your champions. You don't need to share a lot because they're sharing it for you.
Exactly.
But they will only do it if they have a good relationship with you. And back to the point of building relationships. Another thing also, like, since you touched on introvert and so on, I think there's a distinction, because sometimes people don't believe in themselves, and sometimes you're just introverted, and that's totally fine. Other times you're just lacking a bit of self-belief. I think that for everyone, regardless if you are more introverted or extroverted, I think really building self-belief over time is really important. Try to get signals and feedback and basically data to feed your self-awareness that you're doing the right things, that you actually know your stuff. And once you have those data points, then just really run with it and build that confidence.
And now, speaking a little bit more of yourself, how did you find like the gap? And for example, within your LinkedIn posts, because we are seeing you as well growing inside of LinkedIn. It's not only inside of your companies, but also like externally, your products mark it's growing a lot. So how do you find like the gap, and how do you position yourself to build your personal brand?
Those are great questions. Some of them I've never thought about myself. There is one thing that I knew I had to do if I wanted to build a brand in a way. That is not my primarily motivation to build a brand, but I do want to help a lot of people. And so I thought, okay, I need to do something that will be different, basically, because content is just overwhelming these days. There's just so much content, so many people writing, and it's good stuff. Some people write better than others. And so that was one thing I thought a lot about. Okay, how might I write something that differentiate myself? And I ended up with, honestly, through a bit of trial and error, I ended up with sketching. Like, I've never been man, if you see my drawings, it's just, you know, that game where you need to draw something, and then people need to, people laugh. It just becomes a joking game when I'm part of it, because I can't draw a dog. But somehow I've always liked to dissect kind of complex topics and just sketch it with the means I have. And I just started to sketch some product reflections, and I just decided to put it out there, honestly, without too much expectations. But the first sketch I did, I think it got like 1,500 likes or something like that. And then I thought, okay, interesting. People
works.
enjoy this one. Maybe this works. And then the next like 5 were very mediocre, 20 likes, something like that. So then I thought, maybe that was just one off. Then I just kept going, and then back to kind of, you need to keep being consistent and you need to believe a bit in yourself. I knew the sketches were good. I knew the reflections were good. So at some point, I had more and more viral sketches, and I got some sketches with like 1 million views and stuff like that. So then, again, back to the point of self-belief and building your self-belief through data. Like then I got some signals and confirmations from basically the market, by the users, the content consumers, whatever we call it, that they were enjoying this, and therefore I just doubled down on it. And I grew a network so far of, I think in 6 months, of 15,000 followers.
Wow.
Cool. That's remarkable. And I just wanted to make a small plug here. I don't know if you've met or heard of Julia Steyer. She was at Productized as well, and she's working at Google, but she's also into this sketching. It's kind of her side gig, helping people that have no ability to sketch to lose the fear.
I should probably talk to her.
Yeah, she's amazing. So yeah, good connection, and also for people listening if they want to check it out.
Nice.
But I wanted to ask you something now, more specifically about the work that you do hands-on with product leaders. So not necessarily only product leaders, but also leadership in general. So you are working with not sure if the CEO, but some very senior leaders at the company you were working with, and you haven't necessarily had that experience before. And it's something I've felt, and I guess many people have, this imposter syndrome of having to make these high-level decisions or influencing the whole organization, which moves the life of maybe hundreds of people. How do you have how do you develop the confidence to be able to do this without having necessarily been in the hot seat for a long time?
I think you can still feel a bit of the imposter syndrome and still just push through. So to your question, how do you develop the confidence? Well, sometimes I do feel very confident about a certain decision. For example, when I was vice president in Laudal, it's a large organization. It was a lot of responsibility. And of course, there's a lot of times I just don't know what I'm doing, basically, and that happens to every single one of us. We're just trying to figure out. I think back to the relationships point, there's always ways for you to get yourself the data you need to make the decision. It doesn't need to be you thinking about the grand plan and just pushing through. This is precisely what a product leader needs to do, is to basically get the information that she needs, basically, to make a good decision. And I think a lot of product, I don't want to derail this into a different topic, but a lot of product leaders, they think they need to come up with all the strategies and all of it on their own. And actually the best thing you can do is basically collaborate with your team and just really foster a strong collaboration with a lot of different people, get a lot of insights, because the kernel of strategy is a diagnosis, basically the insights. And then you build those things, and of course, when it gets to the point of making a decision, you do need to be confident about it, but by that time you've gathered so many insights that anybody would be confident. Yeah. So yeah, I think can't remember anymore what you asked, but hope it didn't derail too much.
That makes sense. My question was about the imposter syndrome and how to deal with it. The 3 points that you highlighted is you will feel the imposter syndrome, so actually acknowledging that everyone goes through that and no one knows everything at every time. So acknowledging that and still pushing through, then get as much data as possible to get the answers and get as much data that you will feel confident inevitably, and also communicate and collaborate strongly with your team to surface the insights and the data needed.
Exactly. Great summary. And on the imposter syndrome, I think people deal with it in different ways. To me, it's about just embracing that there's always going to be uncertainty. There's always going to be things I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think what distinguishes people that kind of are able to push through is just actually embracing this and just trying their best. And at the end of the day, if you try your best, you've done everything you could. And it turns out that when you do that, and when you surround yourself by great people, you'll succeed anyway. And the imposter syndrome is just something in your mind that is not bothering anything else but you.
Yeah,
Anyone else but you.
that's true.
And the ones that are beside us, they feel the same. They also have their own imposter
Absolutely.
syndrome.
Exactly.
Everyone, man,
Yeah.
everyone.
It's funny, just a small thing that came to my mind the other day when we were chatting, Afonso, about the fact that these people that we sometimes look up to and they seem like almost aliens and super gurus that know everything.
Yeah.
When we meet them and have the chance to have a drink with them, maybe, and have these more human-like conversations, you realize that, these are just real people that have real struggles and also feel imposter syndrome, also don't know everything, but
Absolutely.
they just find their way. And eventually, as you said, with these points of getting data, building relationships, and acknowledging the imposter syndrome, they manage to push through and to overcome it. That's a great thing.
Absolutely. And with training in a way, or with experience, you do start getting more and more comfortable about it, because you start getting to know yourself and how you deal with it, and you kind of start pulling experiences like, oh, I remember that time when I was feeling, oh shit, I don't know how to deal with this. And then you actually created something amazing and everybody loved it. So then you need to pick up those times and build yourself up again. And when you do that repeatedly, you don't really think too much about it anymore, and you just embrace it and you continue to push through. And then of course, then there's a time where you feel it strongly again, and you just need to continue and embrace it.
Yeah.
Keep it up, yeah.
So now let's keep it up with the podcast and move for the next section of it. And actually, let's go and talk a little bit about product vision and strategy. I recently scrolled through one of your LinkedIn posts, and actually you said product managers, they don't own the product vision or anything like that. Who owns then the product vision?
Yeah, it became quite polemic, but this was actually one of those that got like million views and, I don't know, 400 comments, something like that, and a lot of likes. And I did get a lot of messages of people saying, yeah, this resonates a lot. Other people reaching out saying, hey, you don't know what you're talking about. And so it's a big polemic. Here's the thing. I do think that a lot of people don't understand the difference between a product manager and a product leader. And I think in some companies, this is more clearer than others. But the main point there is that when you have a product leader, like a chief product officer or a director of product and so on, that person is the main driver for setting the product vision. Because imagine you're an organization with, let's say, 20 product managers. If every single product manager owns the product vision, then we're going in a very different direction. The whole point of having a product vision is to set this clear destination, holistic destination that everybody is going towards. And so, of course, that needs to be aligned with the business, and it needs to be set by someone who has the bird's eye view of most of these things, basically. And so from a strategic perspective, it, of course, makes much more sense for this to be part of the role of a product leader. And it is in most modern organizations. You go to check up the job description of a CPO at Uber or a CPO at Stripe, whatever. Of course, it's part of the responsibility for that person to set up the product vision for the product. That does not mean that the product managers will not be involved in doing so, but they're not the main drivers. Like ultimately, if there's no product vision in your company, the one accountable is the product leader. Like that's the person I would go to and say, hey, you don't have a product vision. I wouldn't go to the product manager. If there's a product leader, I would go to the product leader, because that's part of the strategic context that the product leader needs to provide to the teams, for the teams to be able to even be empowered to discover and solve problems.
To better understand the roots.
Yeah, you need to set a destination for where you're going. And there's another point here, which is more on practicalities, because for you to set a destination of where you're going with the product, that needs to be extremely aligned with usually the board and the CEO. And imagine if you have like 50 PMs, like good luck having 50 101s with your CEO. It doesn't happen. And that's why, like from a scaling perspective, you do need to have that CPO, for example, with a seat at the table to discuss these things and represent product to the board, for example, and really have those hard conversations representing product and the interest of all product managers.
And back to the times when, for example, you were a product manager as an IC. So how should a product manager try to impact product strategy?
I think it depends a lot on context, and well, everything we're talking about depends on context. That's kind of the golden rule of product. I think it depends a lot on the type of product leader you have. When I was a product manager, I was lucky for having a good product leader that allowed ourselves to define a lot of these things together with him. And so to me, we always had a very sort of hands-on approach of co-creating these things, setting the direction for ourselves together, which is how it should be. Like product strategy, again, like it's not a 20-page grand plan that comes from an off-site meeting and then kind of cascaded to the teams. It's something crafted with the insights from different directions. You need to get the insights from the company strategy, company vision, company goals, your board's motivations, your founder's desires, all of these things. That's context that comes from above. Then you need context that comes from the sides. You need to talk with sales leadership and marketing leadership and whatnot. And then you need context that comes from the teams. Like they are ideally the people talking with users almost every day. And so I do think that product leaders also need to do that, but they do less, of course. It's just a question of time management and priorities. But those learnings from customers, that needs to be foundational for the product strategy. And so that's why it's a collaboration of setting a product strategy. It's not a top-down. And so if you are a product manager, you need to ask yourself, do I have a product strategy in my team? And if not, first thing I would do it would be to collaborate with my product leader to set one. All these things is a bit of a negotiation. Like just because, for example, the product leader sets an objective for a team, it should not be like a one-off, like, hey, this is the objective, go and achieve this outcome, ideally an outcome. It's a negotiation, and that also shows how senior a product team actually is. If they're able to negotiate and say, hey, actually, you know what, I don't think we should go there, because let's remind ourselves of the strategy and our principles and blah, 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 and the opportunities. Maybe we should consider do this instead. And then if this conversation is already happening, this is brilliant because it shows that there's psychological safety for it to happen. So it shows that the product leader is at least doing something, creating that psychological safety, the space. But it also shows that the teams are engaged and they know their stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so as an IC, don't just take whatever the strategy is, but take it with a critical thinking approach. So like consider it and look at the things that you're working on, because probably you have visibility over some details that the leader doesn't have, and try to bring those and have this discussion. That's a cool one.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned also that getting these inputs from different sources, from stakeholders, from customers is very important. So like customer feedback and discovery, it's a key thing in building the strategy and the shaping eventually a bit the vision also. If your company has like zero customer discovery or zero good product practices, let's say, how do you evangelize the teams and the leaders eventually, because you also need to influence them to start developing these habits within the teams?
If you are a product manager, if you don't have insights of what the customer is experiencing, the problems they have, to me, that's actually a great opportunity for you to shine. Back to career conversation. That would be like probably one of the best scenarios ever, because it's actually really easy to surpass the threshold, basically. The first thing I would do is, if the team is not even interested in doing that with you, just go out, get out of the building yourself and bring some insights. Just bring some stories from your customers and then present those stories in quote formats. Hey, very powerful. This is the exact quote. And the quote can be like, oh, I hate your product because blah, 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 blah. And like just if you compile like 5 of those quotes with your customers hating different parts of their experience, or customers saying, oh, I really wish I had your product, but it's way too expensive. I can't afford it. All of these quotes, like I just don't believe that you would not kind of poke a heart by showing those quotes to either leadership or your team. People have pride in what they do. When they hear from customers, the people using their products, your products, that they're struggling, any person would want to fix that. And so that can be a very easy kind of trigger point.
Super. That's a nice one.
Cool, let's move on. Let's move on now a little bit for OKRs. So, I know this is a trendy and hot topic for you that will resonate a lot.
Yes.
And feel free to talk a little bit about it.
Yeah.
Why do you think we need something like OKRs in our companies? What's the secret sauce behind them?
The disappointing answer is that you might not need OKRs and you might need something else. Again, back to context. I think that is a very important thing to always think about. Okay, there's this trendy technique out there. We gotta do OKRs because everyone is doing, and then it doesn't work. There's a few things. So one, you need to basically have the right environment, and you need to essentially get your shit together before you even do OKRs as a company. And what I mean by that is you can't want to do OKRs if you don't have a product strategy, for example. And that happens a lot. It's like, oh, let's do OKRs. And then it just becomes a laundry list of tasks, and which is not OKRs at all. And so first, have a conversation about why do we want OKRs? Well, we want to be a bit more outcome oriented. We want to foster some alignment. We want to foster empowerment in our teams because we've heard feedback that people feel that this is very top down and so on. And we want to build better product. If those are some of your motivations, and if you haven't found anything that works for you, then OKRs can potentially be a great technique that can actually be very transformational. The first thing I like to talk about is, when I talk about OKRs, is get your foundations right, get your company vision in place, get the company strategy in place, get company objectives, because you cannot set a great product strategy without the company context. Yeah. Then get a good product context, strategic context in place, get a product vision, get a product strategy, eventually get some product principles in place. And then once you have a product strategy, you're going to deploy that strategy through your objectives. So the objectives will be basically the most important outcomes that you want to solve now, that you want to focus on now. So that's basically the whole rationale. Like you have a tool, OKRs, that will help you deploy your strategy, basically. And just if you have any questions, something that is not clear, just cut me off, because otherwise I'm going to go on a rant about this.
No, actually, I think I see this moment since you started, and you said OKRs, they may not be for you. So what are like the most effective frameworks for goal setting that you actually have seen working and that you do believe?
Yeah. Even though I said that, I do believe that OKRs can be very helpful. But I have heard I've never worked with anything else. I do have heard of people that have just a North metric, for example, and like to keep things very simple. I do know, of course, a lot of companies like Linear, they don't use objectives at all. They just have some very high-level themes. So it is possible to navigate through either themes or a North Star metric, API trees, for example. To be honest, like I always think that at the end of the day, and everyone is kind of doing more or less of the same, because even people that say like, oh, we don't do OKRs, we just have some outcomes and then we measure those outcomes. And it's, okay,
if you really dig into it, then
they're basically applying the same principles that OKRs advocate for, but calling them something else and sort of tweaking it a bit, which is totally fine. But OKRs can be very handy for product teams. I think for product people, they can be very handy. And I think a lot of people do it wrongly. And so that's why I'm writing an ebook right now on it. And I'll be launching it very soon.
Cool. Fresh stuff.
Yeah. And so you mentioned there's a lot of people doing it the wrong way. So it begs the question, what's the right way of doing? And what's the way that you've seen people, especially thinking about the process to get to these OKRs? What have you seen working well?
Yeah, so one of the first things that I'm advocating for in the ebook, which is that you need to break the rules. And so sometimes people that teach OKRs and people that advocate OKRs, they're very like, hey, this is the framework and you need to use these rules and it needs to be this way. There is a right way for doing it and this is it. I think for you to succeed with OKRs, you do need to break the rules because some rules need to be broken sometimes based on your context. Yeah. But the twist is you need to know how to break them. And so that's what I talk about a lot in the ebook. And you asked about, okay, so what are the main anti-patterns basically? The main things that people do wrong. The main one is tasks. So the key results are tasks, essentially. That's the wrong way to do it. So they basically, okay, this is our objective, we want to do action, or we want to radically improve X experience or radically increase our market in this segment or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then, key result number 1, launch product A and platform X. So these are not results, basically. Like launching something is not a result. What you will get from it is like either bigger growth or profit or whatever it is. That's the result. And as Jeff Goth and Joshua Sadens advocate for, which I love, the key results need to be outcomes. And outcomes are changes in human behavior that drives a business result. Those are the things you want to measure. Those are the changes in human behavior. Those are the actual results. And then the outputs that may lead to those outcomes, those can be the tasks, like the launching the product A or integrating with platform B. Those are the things you will do to hopefully drive the results. But you can't measure launching product A. Product is out, what have you achieved? Because launching a product, you can launch a product and then nobody buys it, or nobody uses it. So, people mistake activities with achievement, basically, and that's a very important point to understand.
What are some other anti-patterns besides this one of the key results being tasks? Do you have other examples that come to mind?
Yeah, so another one is something we already talked about that I see a lot is wanting to jump on OKRs without the foundation, without having the ingredients. And the main ingredients are cross-functional teams. Like great OKRs are meant for teams, not like individuals or departments. It's for a team to own. And also, like great OKRs, they can't live in isolation, basically. They need to be part of a narrative. For you to know, okay, we're going to focus on this outcome this quarter, for example, you need to understand, okay, why? Yeah. So why is this outcome important? More important than defining, okay, we're going to focus this outcome is actually understanding why you're focusing on that outcome. What are you trying to achieve on a bigger scale? How does this impact the company? How does this impact the strategy that the company is choosing? So that's another very common anti-pattern.
Cool. And lastly, regarding OKRs, what are the benefits for team alignment?
Let's break it down into two things. So one is alignment within the team. The other one is alignment within other teams. And the other one is alignment with stakeholders. So those are at least 3 dimensions of alignment. The benefits of aligning within is basically build shared accountability, foster ownership, which will drive motivation, basically. So when people understand that we are in the same direction, that we're all, working towards the same, things are different, basically. Conversations are more productive. It's easier to make trade-offs and so on and so forth. then, you cannot solve big problems without collaborating with other teams, usually. So solving big problems usually means dependencies within teams. That's kind of it's always like that. And for that, there is something called shared OKRs, which is basically when 2 or more teams share the same OKR, they work in different ways to achieve it. And that is a great way to foster alignment within teams and address interdependencies. And then, of course, you have alignment to the rest of the organization. Sometimes sales want to know what kind of problems a product is focusing on and stuff like that. This is a great way because OKRs need to be transparent across the organization, and that brings that benefit. Once you have an artifact like the OKR that is transparent to the whole organization, basically telling the story of what you want to achieve and why, that fosters a conversation. Because now, let's say that sales manager that's always tense, nobody really knows why, that person now already knows, okay, they're focusing on this. Let me have a conversation about that. And so then it's, like the conversations are happening at the right level. But I do want to say that, sorry, just another caveat, because it's important. Like there's shallow alignment and deep alignment. So just because you have an OKR, it doesn't mean that you are aligned. It's logical, but I think people tend to forget about that. Artifacts on its own don't mean nothing when it comes to alignment. You need to work for it. Alignment means that you're having uncomfortable conversations. That's when you're actually aligned, basically. It's if these conversations are happening.
Great caveat. Yeah, I completely agree. It's not because it's written that is understood for everyone.
Exactly.
Let's go for our sprint questions. So, Afonso, one digital product you would struggle to live without?
Good question. So I'm tempted to say LinkedIn, but at the same time, I'm not the biggest fan of social media in general. But I do think that if I want to be honest with myself, I think, especially at this time in my life, venturing into something new, I think LinkedIn can be a great tool. And I can't tell you how many people I've met through LinkedIn. I mean, I met Jones through LinkedIn. And so it is a great tool if you know how to use it well. And it doesn't need to be just for posting and follow the people's work. It's a great network tool. And they're definitely doing something right. And it's so much more than just the LinkedIn itself. LinkedIn Learning is a great tool to learn as well. And I'm excited to see how they will basically further invest in that segment because I think they have a lot of data to build something really, really cool.
Yeah, I feel you. And I'm also fight internally to admit to myself that I really like LinkedIn. But yeah, it's true. Like for building connections and finding new people and showcasing your work, I think
it's the platform.
Yeah.
It is. I've gotten all my gigs on both conferences, big conferences, and I do have a few CPOs as clients for like coaching, all of it through LinkedIn. That's it. So it does help a lot.
It does. Next one. What's the most underrated skill in product management?
Ooh, underrated. I'm tempted to say building relationships, but I think I'll go with communication in general, although I think it's now not so underrated because a lot of people are talking about it. Maybe building relationships because, it's a variation. You can probably bucket that within communication, but I think it goes deeper than that. I think building relationships is key, inside and outside the organization. Yeah.
Now for the last one. If you could shadow any product manager or leader for a day, who would it be?
This is such a tough one. Okay, he is not a product manager. He is a product leader in a way, but I think I would shadow Kristen Idioti. He's not a product leader in a company, like full time, but I would love to shadow some coaching sessions that he has or some fractional work that he might do. I've met him before and he's just a fantastic guy and he's someone I would like to shadow.
Perfect. Moita, do we have our release notes?
Yes, we do. Let's go with it. There was a lot of juice in the episode, so I'll try my best to summarize it. And yeah, just for context, I will go through what we've been talking about, the main points. If there's something that's not clear or inaccurate, feel free to jump in. But yeah, so we started talking about your career and in your particular case, you already had a clear vision of where you wanted to go and the goals that you wanted to achieve, but it turned out to happen faster than you expected, this growth. Luck played a big role in it, but hard work is also something that's always needed in the process. In terms of specific things to skyrocket your career the way you did, there are some things that you recommend and that you also mentor people to do it, which is identifying something your company is not doing very well, then upskill yourself to bridge that gap and to be the one with the skills and the knowledge to solve that problem. Then be known for that, and this is developing the perception of others of the work you do, and this ties very deeply with building relationships. Build the relationships with people, as you said, both inside and outside the company, and this is even more important than building your skill set. Then about building confidence, there's no general recipe that applies to everyone. Some people have no problem getting on stage, others not so much, but you should find the way that you're most comfortable with to share your knowledge. And this doesn't necessarily have to be in front of a large audience. This can even be on one-on-ones with people that you're working with or with leaders. And once they know you and they trust your work and you can show real things, they will become your champions and help you scale your impact across the organization as well. Then it's also very important to build self-belief over time through evidence. So feed yourself with relevant data points of things that you've done in the past, feedback from people and so on, so that you can build that confidence based on data. Then about bridging the gap and building a personal brand, one thing you mentioned is there's so many people creating content out there that it's important to have a way to differentiate and to create something special. In your case, you found the idea of sketching, you tried, and it turned out to go well. Even though it was not consistently a huge success, you kept the consistency and you believed in yourself also. Based on some data points, you were seeing people were giving good feedback, so you kept going with it and it helped you grow a lot, your network and your reach. Then we talked a bit about imposter syndrome, and one thing you mentioned is that it's important to acknowledge it, realize and recognize that everyone goes through it and it's normal that you have those feelings and still push through. Get the data. You need to get answers, and once you have that data, you feel confident to make the decisions. Like you mentioned, get as much data that it will be impossible to not be confident. And you also mentioned the importance of communicating and collaborating with your team to uncover these insights, so build these relationships and work close with your team, and recognize that people around you feel the same. Even like the gurus that we look up to are real people that also go through these things. We talked also a bit about the difference between a PM and a product leader and about who owns the vision. You mentioned that the product leader, so the higher person, let's say in product, should own the vision and create a holistic destination that everyone drives towards. That if all product managers own the vision, there would be a lot of different directions and it could easily become a mess. So it's important to have one central direction that everyone is rowing towards. You also mentioned that it's important to take input from all different areas. So both stakeholders, customers, try to uncover these insights and get information. If there is no discovery at the moment, it can actually be a good opportunity for you to shine and get some insights. And this can be in the form of specific stories from customers, like customer complaints or things that they're struggling with. And if you manage to find these, get out the door yourself and get these insights and then bring them to your leadership or to your team, they will most likely pay attention to it because it's something that will resonate and that they will feel the need to act upon. Then from this, we moved on to OKRs, and there was a lot of juice. So for people if you're listening to this at the beginning, before listening to the whole episode, go back for the details, but I'll try my best to summarize here. So before thinking about doing OKRs or any other type of objectives, it's important to get your shit together and to have the foundations right. And it's also important to, in some specific situations, break the rules and adapt to your context and not just take a recipe that someone created. There are some anti-patterns that are very common. One of them is having key results as tasks, and key results should be measurable changes in human behavior, so in customer behavior. And then after having these key results clear that you can measure on customer behavior, you can have tasks inside the KRs, tasks that will contribute to this KR becoming a reality. And then another anti-pattern is people wanting to jump in without having the foundation right. And for this, it's important to have a clear company vision and then a product vision and a product strategy. And it's also important to have cross-functional teams in place to be able to implement OKRs properly. You also need to understand why you want to use it. OKRs are a way to deploy your strategy. So if you don't have a strategy, it's a bit pointless, right? And in your specific experience, you've only used OKRs, but you've seen in other places things like having only a North Star metric. That's a simpler way to organize it, or only having high-level themes, for example. But generally, what you've seen is that people apply more or less the same principles, but just with some different naming and different specific structures. But the core things are always the same. Also, an important thing to remember is that just because you have an OKR, just because you have an artifact, it doesn't mean that the alignment is there. Finally, one thing you mentioned is that solving big problems generally requires interaction and dependencies between teams. And having shared OKRs can be a good solution for that, to ensure that you have an artifact, in this case an OKR, that brings the transparency and helps conversations across teams happen smoothly. I was talking for a long time, but hopefully I managed to summarize. Thank you for joining.
Thank you all for listening to this episode of the Product Weekend podcast. Please take some time to review us on Spotify or your favorite stream app. And don't forget to check our next episode with Leah Tarim.